All right, wonderful. It is that time, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Winnie, and I am the educator for DuPage County Animal Services. And tonight, we're going to talk about Pet Training 101. So a couple of Zoom housekeeping things before we get started. Everybody should be muted. Please keep yourselves muted the entire time we're recording this for those who couldn't make it. And if you guys could go ahead and turn off your video cameras if they are on. I've got some videos to show you, and Zoom gets kind of wonky if everybody's trying to do their videos while I have a video playing in the Zoom. So if you have a question, please feel free to throw that into the chat box at any time. The presentation should last around 50 to 55 minutes, 60 if I do a lot of storytelling, which I tend to do if you've been here before. But I promise I will stick around at the end for anybody that has any questions. So if they strike you at any time, throw them into the chat box, but I won't check them until the end. Just to show you how that chat box works, I'm going to go ahead and throw a link to our program survey in there. So hopefully everybody's seen where that chat box is located now. We love getting feedback, and hopefully at the end of the program, I'll remind you to fill out that survey to let us know how we're doing and give us ideas for future presentations. Always like to hear that. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to go over the training basics, the do's and the don'ts. We're going to go over methods of training, a couple different ways that we can get behaviors we're looking for. We're going to talk about proofing. And proofing is the fancy dancy term for when your pet actually knows the thing that you're trying to teach them, okay? We're going to talk about ways to set yourself up for success. And then if it's a little bit beyond our control or our abilities, we're going to talk about the types of professionals that can help you in the future. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. And, there are a couple different reasons why you guys might be here, is my guess. So, maybe you just added a new pet to your family, or maybe your happy idea of what living with an animal should look like has gone a little off the rails. I love this picture of the Shiba Inus because, yeah, we all have that one that, tries our patience. I have 2 beagles, and I've worked with beagles for most of my life. And I will say that one of my current beagles, he's a special boy. And especially he's got some anxiety issues that make working with him a little bit more challenging than other animals that I've worked with. So it's okay. It's okay if you're struggling with one particular animal. We've all been there. All right. And maybe you're doing great, but you're just looking for a little additional support, which fabulous. You can never have too much learning because our pets are only going to be as good as their trainer. And most of the time, that's solely going to be us. Okay, you may be working with professional trainers, but on a day-to-day basis, you're the ones in the trenches. You're the ones with your animals all the time. So ideally, you want to learn as much as you possibly can. Training philosophies and techniques, understanding behavior. A lot of times we see animals doing something and we think, ugh, that cat's a jerk, but there are reasons behind that behavior. So understanding where some of the stuff is coming from can help you find other avenues to get where you want to be. And also understanding how our animals are feeling at any given point can help us understand where their mindset is. Okay, so wonderful. I'm so glad you guys are here. Let's get started in that nitty-gritty, because we got to start at the beginning. Okay, so I like to start off with going over some of the things that we should avoid doing. These have been very popular over the years, but they are one way or another have proven not to be as effective as we thought they were, and in some cases counterproductive. They're actually causing more harm than they are helping us. So big one right there for the causing more harm than good is dominance theory. And you hear this all the time. You will hear this with people who have worked with animals their whole lives. You will hear this with people who are professionally working with animals their whole lives, because it's kind of been ingrained in our society that dominance theory is a thing. And the unfortunate part is it's all based on really bad science. This idea that in order to get where we want with our animals, specifically dogs, that we need to use force or fear to teach them their place in the pack, okay? And it's this very prevalent idea. There have been TV shows that have used it a lot. And the idea is that you as the trainer need to be the alpha. You need to be the head of your pack, and everybody looks up to you and respects you. And it's all based on this study in 1947 on captive wolves in a zoo. Now, for those of you who have seen anything about science in the past 80 years, you may realize that zoos weren't great in the 1940s. It was basically a concrete box. We shoved a bunch of animals that didn't know each other in, and then they watched them and saw what happened. And they saw that the biggest wolf, made everybody cower in fear while he got the food. And then the next biggest wolf made everybody cower in fear while he got his portion of the food, and so on down to the puniest wolf, okay? So that was the idea, that the alpha, the biggest, baddest wolf, controls all the resources, and that's a natural thing, and everybody looks up to him. And then everybody wants that alpha position because that's access to all the best stuff. So animals will fight to bring themselves up in the pack, okay? Now, the original study has been refuted a lot. It was refuted as early as the 1960s. Some scientists thought, what if we looked at wolves in the wild instead of in this artificial place that we've put them with a bunch of strangers? I like to equate it to, what if aliens on another planet watched a reality television show and assumed that all human interactions were like that? And I don't know about you, but my life doesn't look like a reality television show. So I wouldn't want anybody assuming that it does. That's what we did. We looked at this very unnatural circumstance and assumed that it applied to animals, bar none, okay? So in the wild, wolves are more of a family, and they tend to, show respect and, let the wolf take the lead that has the most experience. So that might be the oldest male, that might be dad, and it might be mom. So it's a family grouping. So their social systems are a lot more fluid than what this dominance theory assumed. And if a certain wolf has more experience in one area, the pack just lets them take the lead because they have the most experience. It's way more, similar to our social relationships, right? I mean, when we're talking about how to rebuild an engine block, I go to dad. When we're talking about, all stuff medical, I go to mom because she has a degree in the medical field. And when anybody in the family has a problem with their computer, they come to me because we all have our little zones of specialty, right? Same thing with wolves. Now, let's take a step back and let's say that, yes, wolves are dominant. There's an alpha, there's a beta, there's a pecking order. The study is still about wolves, and we've taken this theory and applied it to dogs. There's a reason that we live with schnauzers in our living rooms and not big gray wolves, okay? That's the reason that we don't have a wolf on our living room sofa. It's different, okay? So their relationships, just like with wolves, dogs are going to be more prone to experience, kind of like testing out the waters, what works, what doesn't. Oh, this dog knows what they're doing. Cool. It worked out for them. I'm going to do what they did. Okay. So they're going to follow that mode. It's not, that is the scariest dog, so I'm going to only do what they want, and I want to be that dog. And unfortunately, it has taken over how we work with our dogs, and it's just really not effective. And trying to use force or pain, trying to scare our animals into obeying us, not only is it not as effective as other methods of learning, it can hurt how they view us. We don't want to be objects of fear in our dogs' lives. Okay, we want to be objects of joy. We want to be givers of joy in our dogs' lives. And if we are using dominance-based training, it damages that significantly. Now, another method that is very popular, and I will confess, I did it with my first dog because I didn't know any better. It's what my dad did, it's what my grandpa did, it's what everybody did, is modeling. And I do like to mention this one because it's very prevalent and it seems to make sense. I want my dog to do the thing, so I'm going to force his body to do the thing and then let him know that he did it right. The problem there is, if you're manipulating the animal's body, they're not engaged in the process. And sometimes they're outright resisting the process. Think of it like taking an Uber somewhere versus driving yourself, right? You're not necessarily paying attention to every single cross street. So yeah, you got to the place. Could you get there again on your own? Nah, maybe not. Me, I'm in the back seat, playing on my phone, sleeping, whatever, not paying attention. That's what's going on in our animals' brains when we model. So there are so many other ways to get these behaviors that actively engage their brains. Not to mention the fact that manipulating an animal's body can potentially cause some harm because we're trying to force them into doing something. And if you push on an animal, chances are they're going to lean back into it. They're going to resist. It's called oppositional reflex. And you see it with all sorts of animals, horses. I worked with giraffes. Giraffes are the same way. You put your hand on a giraffe and they lean back into it. It's just an instinctive thing that they do. And so that causes you to use even more force to get where you want, again, potentially causing harm. So we do want to avoid modeling, and instead we want to have our animals using their brains to get where we want them to go. Now, sometimes training isn't necessarily what an animal needs, okay? Because there are underlying factors for behavior. Sometimes it's not that they need to learn something different, it's that they're dealing with an additional circumstance. Maybe there's a health concern. We get the call all the time, my cat's not using the litter box. How do I train my cat to use the litter box again? Our first question is, have you been to the vet? Because there are so many medical reasons why your cat is not using a litter box, okay? Have there been any environmental changes? The best example I have is we had a trainer who was working with a family, and they noticed that their dog was just really, really stressed out all the time in the home, but when they left the home, they seemed to be fine. So she asked, well, has anything changed in the house recently? And it turns out they had bought one of those subsonic devices that scares away underground pests. And the dog was sensing that, and it was constantly stressing them out. So a thing that was meant for little itty bitty furry creatures outside the house was affecting their big furry creature inside the house. They turned that off, the dog went back to normal. Social changes can also be a factor. Adding in another animal or another person to the situation can cause anxiety. My best example here, again, with cats and litter boxes. Cats can be territorial over their litter boxes. So if you don't have every cat has a litter box plus an extra litter box just for funsies, they can actually bully each other away from using the litter box, and that can cause significant issues as well. Now, a new animal coming into your home, you want to follow the 3-3-3 rule. 3 days, that animal is going to be super stressed out. Think about going to a new job or a new school for the first time. They don't know what the rules are. They don't know if they like it here. They don't know if the people are nice. They don't know where the bathrooms are. So those first 3 days, you might see a lot of stress behaviors that could work out on their own. Within 3 weeks, that should start to fade away as you get into a routine. Routine is super, super important for animals so that they know what to expect. Helps relieve a lot of that anxiety. 3 months, fully acclimated into the house, they got the routine down. Any behaviors that you're seeing here, that's when you might want to call in a trainer to have them work on behaviors that you're seeing, because chances are that's either a learned or rewarding behavior that they're fully vested in, or that it's something else going on, again, health-wise maybe, that you need to investigate further. Okay, so let's say we've ruled it out. We have a behavior that we are just not a fan of. We don't like it in our house, and we're trying to figure out what we can do. One of the things we want to do first is look at management. So management isn't training. It's not teaching anything. It's preventing access. Okay, so let's say you have a dog that is constantly underfoot when you're in the kitchen. They're just there waiting for you to drop some tasty morsel. And you've tripped over them and you've yelled at them and you've told them to get out, and they still are there. Because let's face it, we all drop something, and eventually that behavior will be rewarded for them. Practice makes perfect, okay? Or, as some say, practice makes permanent. So what we do with management is we don't give them the chance to practice the behavior we don't like. For example, putting up a baby gate, not letting them in the kitchen at all while we're doing food prep. Now, have they learned not to be a pain in the butt during food prep? Absolutely not. As soon as that gate comes down, they're right back in the kitchen, driving you crazy, okay? But they don't get to practice it. And then if you do happen to drop something, they don't get that reward for being underfoot, all right? So environmental management is key for any problem behavior that you're seeing that you want to work with training on, because you don't want them to get rewarded for behaviors that are undesirable, all right? Now, sometimes management's all you need. It can kind of feel like cheating, because, yeah, you didn't really take the time to teach them or anything. But let's be honest, we all have our battles to pick every day, okay? And sometimes the reward benefit versus the time effort to take in isn't going to be as great. So if a baby gate works for you, done. Perfect. Then you don't need to go any further if that system is working for you. Just make sure everybody on your house is on board with what the management looks like. So, for example, if you have animals that resource guard from each other, maybe they get really, really snappy when it's food time. You can separate and feed them inside their separate crates, different rooms, keep them away. It's one of the things that I do with my dog is I try to, because he can get a little snippy when food's involved, is that we make sure that they're separated when they're given treats and they go to their separate corners. And when we do food, we make sure that there's a good amount of space between so that there's no fighting. If your animals are really reactive at the windows, then, putting film up or blocking their view outside so they can't see that. If it's car doors that set your animals off, maybe playing soft music in the background to help mute that, or keeping them in an area of the home where they're not as likely to hear it. That might solve the problem for you. If your animal is really fearful of new places, stay home. There's no law that says you have to take your dog to an outdoor cafe. If it's going to be super, super, super stressful for you and super, super stressful for the dog, then don't do it. I will be honest, my dogs can be very reactive when they see other dogs on a walk, and it's not something that I feel comfortable managing on my own. I am afraid that there might be some sort of injury. So when we can't walk together, my husband and I, so that we can each manage our zone, we do lots of stuff outside in the backyard where everybody's nice and safe. Okay, there's no we don't want to put these arbitrary rules on ourselves that, oh, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. You know, there are lots of different ways we can make sure that our animals are getting full and enriching lives that don't drive us crazy and don't drive them crazy and keep everybody safe. So if you have animals that are resource guarding from you, you can leave them alone with their stuff. Don't reach for their bowl. I also resource guard my food. I don't like it when anybody tries to reach for my stuff on a plate. Not gonna lie, I've snarled at a few people when they reach for my French fries without asking. So I get it. And if you have animals that feel the same way, yes, that's absolutely something that you can work on with them. But if that's not in your wheelhouse, we can also just leave them alone. Okay? All right, so let's talk about some tricks of the trade for making sure that our animals are engaged in training. So this is something that when I first started at the shelter a few years ago, I kind of knew it, but I thought it was lame until I did it myself and realized how effective it was. Okay, so this is something that you're like, people only do that on TV because it looks good. No. This works and it's great. And it's the cue, mark, reward method. Okay, because we want your animal to know exactly when they did something right. And the only way to do that is to mark it. So one way you can do that is with a clicker like this that I have in my hand here. And what's great about the clicker is it always sounds the same, no matter if I'm in a good mood or a bad mood. Always sounds the same. So it's very consistent. And when my pets hear this, they know they did something right and they're getting a reward for it. Now, my one Quincy, who is a little on the sensitive side, I will admit that that noise is a little harsh for him. It stresses him out a little bit. He's pretty noise sensitive. So instead with him, I use a verbal mark and I use the word yes. So whenever he does something that I like, I say yes, and I give him a reward. Now, how did we build that relationship between yes means cookie? We just worked on it a little bit. So 2 minutes, I charged the marker. That's what it's called. And basically what I did was I said, yes, gave a cookie. Yes, gave a cookie. Yes, gave a cookie. To the point where when I said yes, he was already reaching for the cookie in my hand because he knew that's what it meant. Now, when I say the word yes, he looks at me very happy because he knows that means he did something right and he's getting a reward for it. So you definitely want to build that association with the mark. You want to be consistent. And even if you screw up sometimes, I've done this, you know, I've been on the phone with somebody and I'll be like, yes. And he looks at me like, what did I do? I still give him a cookie, okay? Because I don't ever want him to lose faith in the mark. And I try very carefully not to say yes in that same manner after the first few times that I screwed up there. So just be aware that you never, ever want them to lose faith in that mark. So when we cue, when we ask for something, as soon as they do it, we mark and then we reward. So the mark, the clicker, the yes, the good job, you know, whatever it is, that's the promise that they're getting their reward. Now, I work with beagles, so mostly my rewards are food-based. And I'm not going to lie, it's really easy with a beagle because they'll eat anything. Okay, if you have a more selective dog, you want to find something that they find rewarding. So you want to use those highest value rewards that you can find. That might be specific treats that you only give out when training. They're reserved specially for this. Or it could be a toy. It's a specialty toy that they only get to play with during training. And you can test it out a couple different ways. An easy way is to put a bunch of different types of treats down and see which ones they go for first. Switch it up, switch the order, see if they go for the same one first. All right, that's how you figure out, ooh, that's the one. That's the one that they really like. And keep in mind, if you're doing a lot of training, you might have to switch up that reward because, I mean, I like ice cream. Someone offered me vanilla ice cream every single time I did something good. Whatever. Chocolate chip cookie dough, though, on the other hand, excellent. But after a while of only getting chocolate chip cookie dough, I might go real crazy for some mint chocolate chip. So if they start to lose interest in taking that treat, it might mean that it's time to switch up to a new special treat. Or a new special toy, or even some type of interaction with you. We were working with a cat the other day, and he didn't give a fig about the treats that we were giving him, but he loved head scratches. So that's what we rewarded him with every time he did something correctly. So just keep in mind, you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're giving as the reward is actually rewarding for your animal. And keep in mind that if an animal is doing something, they find it rewarding, okay? They're not idiots. They're not going to do something unpleasant over and over again. If they're doing something consistently, they find it rewarding. Just because we don't understand why it's fun to jump up on people doesn't mean that they don't find it that way. Now, for example, here in the picture, we have the dog jumping up on the gentleman. There are a couple different scenarios that could be happening here. Maybe this dog is jumping up to get attention. If the guy shouts at the dog and pushes at them, even though it's negative attention, it's still attention. The dog got what it wanted. So sometimes we need to go back and figure out, okay, what is my animal finding rewarding about this situation, and how can I use that to get a desired behavior? Wonderful. So now let's go in and talk about different methods for animal training. We're going to talk about some of the easier ones. There are going to be whole classes on each one of these. So we're just going to give an overview that you can use. Some of the basic ones are going to be luring, capturing, targeting, and shaping. Now, shaping we will touch on, but I will say that is something for a more experienced trainer. And typically, that's what you're going to see like in this picture with service animals who have been trained to do very complex things. So shaping is more for complex behaviors that require multiple steps. Luring, capturing, and targeting can pretty much get everything that you're going to need in a regular day-to-day situation. So when I talk about luring, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're going to use a desired item, a treat or a toy, and you're going to lead the animal into a behavior. So this is very commonly used for basic stuff like sit. So a great example is for a dog or a cat. If you bring your hand slowly up above their nose, as their nose goes up, their bottom goes down. Once their bottom's touching the ground, you give them the reward, okay? Now, sometimes we can rely on that lure too much, and it can lead to a loss of focus. Like, oh, okay, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again and just getting the same reward, okay. And it might even devalue that treat. So when you're luring, you only want to use a lure for a few times. So once they're doing the desired behavior 2 or 3 times, take the lure out of the equation. Again, we want to make sure that we're using those high value items. So those special treats, those special toys that are reserved just for occasions like this. And when we're holding our lure, we're going to pair it with a hand signal that we can use as our cue. Because animals are much more visual than they are verbal, right? So a hand cue is a lot of times going to be more effective than the verbal cue. Now you can pair it, but something I've noticed with my animals is that I can be on the opposite end of the room, give them the hand cue for sit, and they sit. I'm on the opposite end of the room and I say sit, and they just kind of look at me. All right. So it's more effective a lot of times making sure that you have that hand signal with it. Okay. So let's take a look at a video. This lady is going to lure a puppy and how to move forward. So a little video for you guys to see here. So she's got the lure in her hand. You can see in her other hand, she has a clicker, and she clicks as soon as the puppy takes a step forward. Now, how she's holding that lure creates a particular hand signal that she uses consistently. Now, you want to make sure that animals are going to be able to follow your cue. Okay, so if you're moving the lure too fast, they can get confused. So you want to keep them right up with you. And like we said before, as soon as you see that they're following it with the lure, use the same hand signal and then treat with the other hand. So they associate still that same hand signal with getting the lure. So that's exactly what she did. She led across, she treated with the other hand. Okay, wonderful. So that's luring. And you can use that for sit, for down, for all sorts of different things that are going to be pretty basic behaviors. Now, for capturing, that's our next method. It can be a ton of fun, and it can be very easy. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience, because what we're doing is we are waiting for an animal to naturally offer us something. And once they offer us something, we reward it because we want to see it again. Okay, so a great example is a bow. Dogs typically, when they get up from a nap, cats, when they get up from a nap, they will stretch out and they'll go into that bow. So we can mark and reward what they're doing. Now, it's easier to do this with a behavior that you see a lot of, okay? It can be trickier and sometimes really hard. It's not impossible, but it can be really hard for behaviors that you don't see very often, okay? So you might need to pay attention to the circumstances where you see that behavior to try to recreate those circumstances to give you more opportunities to mark and reward the behavior. The reward placement is really important because you want to get it right as they do the behavior. So this is really paying attention to what our animals are doing. And that's where our patience comes in, right? Because if you're looking for a full-on bow, you know, you don't want to reward them if they do like a little leg stretch. That's not the same thing. You know, it may be the same time and place that they normally do their bow, but instead they did a leg stretch this time. So that's where that patience can come in. One of the easiest things to capture is eye contact or stationing in front of you. So I've got a video of a trainer here working with a dog on capturing 4 on the floor and basically just waiting patiently. So what I like to do is, if I have treats in my hands, a lot of times the animals are going to be focused on the treat, but every once in a while they're going to like glance up and like try to read you, like what's going on. So if I'm trying to capture eye contact, I wait and I just watch them and wait for them for that eye shift upwards. And then I mark and give the treat. Okay, mark and give the treat. Because the reason it's important to capture and reward eye contact, dogs don't naturally give direct eye contact. They find that, you know, uncomfortable, a little rude. But by rewarding them for direct eye contact, they're checking in on you to see what to do next. And that will help you with other methods of training. You know, you can't train them if they're not paying attention to you in the first place, or if they're avoiding looking at you. So this is one of the great things to do. So you saw how in the video, she even like threw some treats away to have him go get them and then come back and reset. And he was standing there right in front of her, and she rewarded that. That's exactly what she was looking for. He had 4 paws on the floor, he was facing her, and he was giving eye contact. And that's what she rewarded him for. So those are some very easy natural behaviors to capture. Stepping up our game a little bit, we can go into targeting. So targeting is teaching an animal that when they interact with the target, they get a reward. So you're not necessarily directly using your hands or the treat for them to focus on. Instead, there's a target. And then it'll guide the animals through the task. Now, for the most part, targeting is great for teaching animals to go to a particular area, to go into a kennel, to do different behaviors like that. On the more fancy side of life, if you are trying to train your animal to star in Hollywood movies, you would eventually want to fade out the target, because, you know, no Hollywood movie wants a bullseye sign right in the middle of their medieval scene when you want a dog to do something, okay? But for our purposes, keep the target, okay? There's no reason not to. Yes, absolutely, you could work to fade it out just like before, but honestly, for our purposes, it's just as easy to keep it and work and continue to reward your animals for engaging with that target. And you want to make sure that you are still using those positive things when they interact with the target, so that they still see the target as something worth interacting with. And when I said at the beginning that, you know, we are going to talk about mostly dogs, but, you know, animals of any kind can benefit from this kind of training, I wasn't kidding. So here we have a chicken learning to target train. So the target is above her, and we're waiting for her to interact with it. Once she does, there's a click, and then she gets her reward. In this case, some mealworms. Gross. But yeah, so any animal can benefit from these types of training methods. Again, it's just finding out what is rewarding for the animal. So in the instance with the chicken, I believe that this person was working to easily get them back into the coop at the appropriate time, because nobody likes to chase chickens around the yard. That's just entertaining to watch, not entertaining to do yourself. So having them follow a target to the appropriate place where everybody gets rewarded makes it a lot easier at the end of the day. Okay, so diving into our last method of training is shaping. And like I said, shaping is for complex tasks that have multiple steps. And what's great about shaping is it's a mental workout for our animals, because they're problem solving. They are learning by trial and error what you're looking for. It's very easy, though, to get bogged down in the details. So this is something that takes a lot of patience, and that's why I would recommend, you know, for experienced trainers, this is good. I'll be honest, I have done a little bit of shaping, and I am not great at it. So it's something that I try to avoid, because I get frustrated, and then my animals get frustrated because why won't you do the thing? So yeah, full honesty here, this is something for advanced trainers, but I did want to show you because it's really cool. And if you're up for a challenge, you know, reach out to us. We can point you in the direction of more information. You definitely want to start with a plan. So what is the end behavior that you're looking for, and what little steps can you reward to get them there? The reason I have a picture of a dog in a box is because there's a very famous graphic of 1,000 things you can do with a box. And Sophia Yen, a pioneer in working with animals, has a wonderful video where she teaches her dog to put 2 front feet in the box. So let's take a look at this.
In this demo, I'm going to have my dog put her front feet in the box, but I'm not going to tell her what I want. Watch and see if you can tell how she learns.
So anytime the dog interacts with the box, right now she's rewarding. She's teaching the dog that we're working with the box. The box is important, okay? Now, as it goes along, she waits for more. So, oh, the dog's like, what if I put my foot here? And he gets a reward. So it's trial and error. You build it up in tiny steps and wait. Like, nope, that wasn't it. Okay, what else do I need to do? And then 1 foot in gets a reward. Okay, so now we know 1 foot in gets a reward. Let's see what else we can do here. And you'll see she has him do each of the little baby steps a couple of times before she moves on to the next one. And, you know, no pressure, guys. Dr. Sophia Yin was a pioneer in animal behavior, and this is an incredibly smart dog. You're not going to see this kind of turnaround with your dog. If you did, film it, send it to me. I will eat crow. But this is extraordinary circumstances, okay? So don't feel bad if it takes you more than one session to get your animal to do something like this. But what I love is that it does show the power of her mark. When she says yes, that dog knows exactly what's coming, right? Because it stops what it's doing to go get its reward. Now you can see the dog's getting a little frustrated. So Sophia goes back, Dr. Yan goes back and makes sure that he's still getting rewarded for doing stuff because she doesn't want him to get frustrated or lose focus. And there we have it.
Have you figured it out?
I absolutely love that video because it is so impressive, but I find it very intimidating as well. So don't feel bad if you also feel intimidated by how fabulously Dr. Yin works with her animals. So we talked a little bit about this during the shaping video, but you know, how do we know that our animal actually knows a behavior? Because as we saw, just doing it once wasn't enough, right? So we put the 2 feet in and then she continues to do it multiple times to make sure that the animal knows what we're asking of it. So that's called proofing, okay? Now, a good rule of thumb is that if you ask your animal to do a behavior, depending on the amount of times out of 5 that they give you the correct behavior, can tell you where to go next, okay? You can either push to the next level if they do 5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5. That shows that they have a pretty good grasp on the behavior. If they only get like 3 or they seem hesitant, then we need to stick where we are, make sure that they're still getting it. If, however, they do 2 or less correctly, we might have jumped ahead to something a little bit too complex and we need to go back down. For example, with our luring, if we are switching from holding the treat to not holding the treat, and the animal is no longer responding to the hand cue, you might have to go back to holding the treat in your hand again so that they get it, okay? So that would be an example of dropping back down. If you have the food in your hand and you ask them to do it a couple times and they get it mostly correct, take the treat out and just use the hand cue. So that's a way to push or go up to the next level. Make it a little bit harder to get the behavior that you're looking for. Now, another thing that we have to consider with proofing is animals don't generalize the way we do. So when we ask for a behavior in the kitchen, they are not going to make the connection when we ask for the same behavior somewhere else. A sit in the kitchen to them is different than a sit outside. Okay, we need to make sure that we are practicing all sorts of different things with them so that they get that this cue means this everywhere we go and in lots of different circumstances. Or even when I'm standing right next to you, sit means this. And when I'm across the room, sit means this. Okay, so a lot of times they talk about the 3Ds: distance, duration, and distraction. So how far away can you be? Ask for the cue and get it. How long will they hold the cue? And will they do the cue even when things are distracting? So something I'm working on my dogs right now is they are sitting across the room and I drop a treat. Will they stay in their stay? That's something we're working on right now because beagles love to grab food off the floor. I need to make sure that if I ask them to stay, if food is dropped on the ground, that they will stay where they are and I can safely pick up the food that they're not supposed to get. So it's something that we're working on right now. And it can be challenging, not gonna lie, but it is well worth it because when you say, oh yeah, my dog knows this, this, and this, and then you're in a different place, there's a whole bunch of things going on and lots of distractions. Even a different person asking for the same behavior isn't going to be the same in your dog's brain, okay? Or your cat's brain or your rabbit's brain, whatever you're looking for there. So that's why you want to make sure that you're practicing a lot of circumstances and these different times, you know, different distances, different people in your house. I will say that it annoys the heck out of some people when they come over to my house, specifically my brother, and he will ask my dogs to do a trick and they just look at him. You know, they've never worked with him before. Meanwhile, I can be across the room, ask for the trick, and they do it, even though I'm across the room. It's because I've worked with them. They know what that cue means coming from me. They don't know what it means coming from him. So if you find that in your family, one person tends to be doing the training with the animals, don't be surprised if other family members don't get the same results that you do, because you have to put in the time and build that relationship and make sure that animals know that, oh yes, this means the same thing for this person as well. Now, we've talked a lot about what to do during training, but it's important to think about what to do before training as well, because we want to make sure that everybody's going to be in a good mindset. Think about when you're trying to learn something new. If you're in a bad mood, or if the person teaching you is in a bad mood, or there's lots of distractions going on, or you didn't sleep well, or you're not feeling well, it's harder to learn. Your brain is not going to be as engaged. And it's the exact same for our animals, okay? We want to make sure that everybody is in learning mode when we're trying to do training. So think about what your body language is saying, because animals are super empathetic, especially dogs. They can pick up on what we're feeling. And we want to make sure that we're not causing our animals to feel uncomfortable. Also, a lot of times how we interact with our animals inherently makes them feel uncomfortable. Like this cat in the picture. I'm sure this cat has many regrets, okay? And I don't blame it. That looks very uncomfortable. So think about where you are and what that approach does for your animal, okay? So typically you don't want to stand too rigid. Animals can read body posture. Nice and loose is very good, all right? You don't want to be leaning over because that can be very intimidating. So trying to get more on their level can help. When we approach dogs, we tend to do it the same way we approach people. You know, we're making direct eye contact, we're going right at them directly, and, you know, we mean business. So we're hurrying to get to that spot. All of those things say to a dog, watch out. This person, this thing, it means me harm. Those are all aggressive signals in the canine world, also in the feline world, okay? If you ever watch animals naturally approach each other, you notice they don't come right at each other unless they're fighting or play fighting. Instead, they kind of do an indirect approach to show that they're not a threat. So we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would say to our animals that we're threatening. Okay. And we definitely don't want to manhandle them in a way that makes them uncomfortable, because that's going to put them into that flight or fight mode. And that's not a learning mode. So we want to make sure that we are respecting them, that we are handling them with respect, that we are engaging them in a way that is fun, because training needs to be fun or animals won't want to do it. So we want to keep learning fun and as stress-free as possible. So how can we tell if our animals are stressed? Well, lots of subtle signs that animals will give us. We're going to talk mostly about dogs right now, but there's all sorts of stuff on cats and rabbits too. With dogs, some of the less obvious ones might be the tongue flick or lip smacking. Has nothing to do with food. They're just signaling with their tongue that they're uncomfortable. If they yawn for no reason, that might be a self-soothing mechanism. If they're looking away or turning their body away, those are all signs that they are uncomfortable. And it gets to the point where if we ignore those stress signals where they're uncomfortable, they might lead up to trying to defend themselves. So anytime we see these kinds of stress signals in our animals, we want to be aware of what's going on. Now, some of these stress signals can also be good stress, right? Anticipation, kind of like us riding a roller coaster. It's not exactly a relaxing experience, but it's an enjoyable one, even though it's stressful. So if you have the food bowl in your hand and your dog is doing things that come up as stress signals, maybe that paw lift or that tongue flick, that could be anticipation. Context is very important when talking about animal communication. So here are just a few other ones that you may see in an animal that's experiencing stress or fear. Furrowed brows, panting, moving in slow motion, moving away, or if they're hyper vigilant or pacing, you might see that as well. And anytime we see signs like this, we want to try to have our animals relax, because they will learn better in that relaxed position. Now, sometimes we might experience an animal that's going through what's called trigger stacking. That's why we want to try to avoid letting the animals practice the behavior to the best of our ability. So environmental management that we talked about at the beginning is super important for this, because let's say that they get stressed out over a strange person, and then the next thing is a strange car, and that's stressful. And then the next time they see a strange new animal, okay? Where they've gotten to the point, each of those stressors build on top of each other. And when they get to the certain point, it's the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. They can't learn past that point. Once they've reached over their threshold, after all those stressors have compounded on each other, that stress reaches a boiling point and learning is done. They're not capable of learning in that point. Think about Alexander's horrible, no good, very bad day. Okay, one bad thing happened. Then another bad thing happened. Then another bad thing happened. Maybe a few of them he would have been able to recover from, but by the end, he's ready to blow. And you can bet if he had to take a test at school that day, he wouldn't have done very well at it, because when you're in that constant state of, there's no learning coming through, okay? So trying to find what is triggering our animals, finding patterns, what is causing our animals to get to that point where food can't get their attention, calling can't get their attention, even physically touching them, they're not paying attention to you anymore. That could be an indication that they have had all of those stressors compounded on each other to the point where they're over threshold and they are just so overwhelmed that they're freaking out. okay? Now, making sure that our animals are going to be approaching training as stress-free as possible, there are activities that we can provide to reduce stress. And a lot of them are in the category of enrichment. Enrichment is just a fancy term for letting an animal do their animal things. So dogs are foragers. In the picture here, we have a snuffle mat. It's a way for an animal, for a dog, cat, whoever, to sniffle through all the little pieces of fabric and forage for the kibble inside. And letting our animals do their animal thing reduces their stress levels. Even just sniffing for a dog releases endorphins in the brain. It's really good for them. So making sure that we're providing ways for them to reduce their stress while also keeping them mentally engaged is going to help in the long run lead to a more productive training session. And some animals may need help even further than that. They may need help learning how to relax. They may need help learning how to do quiet time. So the easiest way to do this is to have a section of the room, house, whatever, that is designated as their safe space, as their relaxation place. Maybe it's a crate, maybe it's a bed. And anytime they're there and relaxing, you leave them alone. You let them experience that relaxation right there. Maybe you put on calming music to help when they're in that space. Maybe you give them like a little treat that they can, like a chew toy or something, another calming activity, a licky mat, something like that. Or maybe you teach them how to lay down and lay down for a long period of time, despite what distractions are going on. That's called mat work, and there's all sorts of YouTube videos on that. And most importantly, we want to reward them for relaxing. So when they're in their relaxing place, you can give them rewards, but put the rewards where they're relaxing. Don't call them over to give them a reward. That defeats the purpose. Instead, you can toss them some kibbles or something where they're relaxing to let them know that, yes, exactly, that's where you should be right now. Now, it happens to the best of us. There's going to be a time when an animal is dealing with something that is hard to work with. Maybe it's severe separation anxiety. Maybe it's extreme reactivity to dogs. Maybe they freak out every time they see another dog on a walk. Okay, there are professionals that can help. So first off, I always say go to a veterinarian, because we want to make sure that the behavior, the problem behaviors you're seeing aren't medically caused, okay? You might also want to go to a certified trainer. We recommend finding ones that are using positive reinforcement, because we've talked about that negative stuff doesn't really help you in the long run. We want to use positive reinforcement, and absolutely we want to pay our animals for when they do something correctly, right? We expect a paycheck at the end of the week. When our animals do something awesome, we want to make sure that we're paying them and saying thank you for that as well. So certified trainers, behavior consultants are going to be for those more complicated ones, like separation anxiety, reactivity. Trainers are going to be more to help you with the basic behaviors. Veterinarian behaviorists are even above that, and they can help with medically induced behaviors, like maybe there is severe anxiety that does need to have some medication to help your animal get along in life, and that's okay. So if you're looking for a trainer or behavior consultant, absolutely you want to make sure that you are going to be involved in the process. Ask them about the training methods they're using. Ask them how long they've been training and where did they learn how to be a trainer. Because you don't want Billy Bob down the street who learned how to use a prong collar on his own dog and is now calling himself a trainer. You want someone that has gone through, you know, sessions, that has proven that they know what they're doing before you give them access to your animals. Let them, you know, ask them to provide testimonials from previous clients. make sure that you can observe a training session if you're not going to be directly involved in them yourself. You want to be able to make sure you can observe. Anybody that's not going to let you see what they're doing with your animal should not be trusted with your animal. Okay. And then, is this going to be indefinite, or how can you continue this training on your own? A lot of times you might do like a board and train where you drop off your dog. Okay, that's great. The animal might learn a lot of stuff from that trainer, but the dog lives with you. So you need to be able to make sure that any progress made can be continued at home. Whew. All right, folks, that was a lot of information. Thank you so much for sticking with me. We will get to that Q&A session here in just a minute. Before we do that, I just want to plug, we got a couple of upcoming webinars. So Feathered Friends will come up in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about Chicagoland's wild birds and how to make sure that we are living harmoniously with them. In October, it's all about behavior problems. So we'll start with kitty concerns, and then towards the end of October, we'll talk about canine concerns. So a lot of stuff that we talked about, that we touched on today, we will more fully go into methods to work with problem behaviors during canine concerns. And of course, anytime you guys have questions, you can always reach out to us at DuPage County Animal Services. Our goal is for every animal in DuPage County to be in a happy, healthy home with loving families. So no question is too small. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Absolutely reach out to us if you are having problems. If we can't provide you resources to help with the problem, we are more than happy to refer you to someone who can help, okay? So, reach out to the shelter. The main line is 630-407-2800. You can also reach out to me directly. My email is humane.education@dupageco.org. We are always happy to take your questions and help. Now, let's see if we have any questions from the chat. Yes. Okay. So when you are looking at environmental management, but your animals will jump the baby gates and you're trying to block them from an area that has a door. So one of the things that I would ask is, do they have to be in that particular room, or is there a room that has a door where you can put the animal during times that you need them to? Okay, because 100%, if an animal figures out they can jump over something, they're going to continue to try it no matter how tall your baby gate is. So my question then would be, is there another room that you can use instead that does have a door? And at the same time, providing them something in that room that is desirable so that they want to stay in that room. For example, when we need to do something like give a webinar in the home, I don't want to have to worry about my dogs barking in the background. So they go into my husband's office and we give them treats, music to listen to, all sorts of stuff. So I don't have to worry about them busting down the door of my office because they're actually in a completely separate building right now. And they're having themselves a good time. And then at the end of this webinar, I'll go over and grab them. And everyone's happy in that way because they didn't get to practice barking out the window while I was on a webinar, and I didn't have to worry about being able to be heard while on the webinar. So that's what I would suggest when you're talking about environmental management, especially if you have larger animals that are going to have that capability of going over baby gates. Now, they do create different kinds of gates that you can look into, different heights. You can experiment with all sorts of different things, but trying to keep it easy, do that first and see if it works. Okay. All right, folks. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm going to stick around for a few more minutes, though, just in case we do. And while we wait, I'm going to go ahead and throw in that link to the survey. Please feel free. Let me know how we're doing. Ideas for future programs. I always like to hear from our audiences what we can be offering in the future. And if you guys have anything else, again, you can always reach out to me via email or phone. All right, wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much for spending the night with me. Have a great rest of your night and happy holiday weekend. Hopefully I'll see you at a webinar soon. Bye now.